Hi, this is Ted. Today I'm going to be walking through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I'm going to be looking at every miracle that Jesus performed, both individually and in group settings. Before I say anything, I do want to say you might find another thing that I missed, and in all likelihood it would be a group setting that might be a verse or two long that somehow I missed, because I did this years ago with multiple drafts. I lost some of what I had in further drafts, but I returned to it this last couple of weeks, and I spruced it up and got it ready to go, and I found quite a few group miracles that were missing from the originals. Having said that, I do want to establish right from the beginning, I'm looking at Jesus from a skeptical point of view, from the skeptic's point of view. I am also looking at Jesus and accepting his miracles on face value. In other words, from a literal application, from a literal account. And I'm looking at those as if they are literal, and also from a skeptic's point of view. Okay, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I'm looking for, in particular, could this miracle that Jesus did, could it be a placebo? I have seen many, I have looked at hundreds of miracles online, and I've found most of them could easily be done with a placebo. It's not saying that they were all done placebo-wise, but I have yet to find a true miracle. However, I'm going to look at what Jesus did and ask myself, using the same ways, the same measure. Well, placebos have limitations. They can look just like miracles. In fact, they can duplicate them so well you will not be able to tell the difference up front if something is a miracle or if it's a placebo. If it's placebo, it's human-centered. If it's a miracle, it is something God did. So I'm taking it from a skeptic's point of view. I'm also accepting the Gospels literally. Why? Because I'm not there in Jesus' day. I can't see what he did. Now, a true skeptic's going to come along and say, but the writers exaggerated, or the writers did this or that. All right, that I'm not dealing with. I'm dealing with it only as if every single one is literal, and then look at it and examine it in the light of what we know today. The placebo will demonstrate itself and separate itself from a miracle in at least 4 different ways. There's many more different ways, but in what we need to do, what I need to do with the miracles, is to look at it with these 4 in particular. Number 1, placebos are rarely permanent. So if you've seen somebody get healed and an hour or two or a day or two later, it's all back to normal, that is a definite sign of a placebo. A miracle will last. Secondly, a placebo cannot help somebody 100% deaf, 100% blind, or 100% unable to walk. It can help people who are legally blind, legally deaf, and with some ability to walk. It can help them. It can help them progress. It can help them be better. It can take away pain, thus relieving a lot of the limitations one has. But as I mentioned before, these are almost always temporary. Thirdly, the placebo can only work with functional diseases. They cannot work with structural diseases. Functional means that there's nothing that you can look under a microscope and see. You cannot see a bone straighten out. You cannot see cancer just disappearing just like that. These things are impossible for a placebo to do. So it's functional only. The person who probably knows more about placebos than anybody else in the world is a professor who says placebos may make you feel better. It's working with a symptom, part of a disease, but it will not cure you. And that's by Ted, what is his name? Ted Kaptchuk. And that's something he claims. Fourthly, in a group setting, 40 to 50% of people can be affected by a placebo. It cannot reach everybody. So with those limitations, I'm going to look at Jesus and see if he passes the test. Because, as I mentioned, there's going to be a lot of diseases. You're not going to be able to tell the difference. Is it miracle or not? So what I'm looking for are those things which can only be miracle. And if there's quite a few of them, no doubt the whole, every one, even the ones that look like they could be placebos, from a skeptic's point of view, it falls into the realm of miraculous. So I will go through it. First of all, every demonic possession could easily be duplicated by placebos. And I don't care to get too much into this. I don't have time for this. Secondly, deaf, blind, and unable to walk. I put not enough information in that and in the demonic. Why? Because sometimes I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm just reading a quick description of something that happened. Is this person born blind? Can he see in part? Nowadays, we have this legally blind, which means they can only see 20 feet what you would see in 200 feet if you're not legally blind. Or they might have tunnel vision. There's different ways that somebody can be legally blind up in front of a stage claiming to be healed temporarily and them truly not being healed. But a placebo has taken over and given them a temporary relief or a temporary better sight than they had. Same thing with deafness and same thing with the inability to walk. The third category is skin disease. Once again, everything under skin disease I left with not enough information. I've yet to find enough information on any of these things. I would tend to want to push them into the miraculous for different reasons. But given what we have, just literally word for word, I can't say one way or the other, simply because I'm not there. I don't know the whole story. The skin disease, I will admit, when I say not enough information, it's on my part. I don't have enough information because I don't understand this enough. I've never studied skin disease too much, what they call leprosy versus what we call leprosy. There are 3 cases of people dead, and I left that likewise not enough information for 2 reasons. First of all, there is something called the Lazarus syndrome, and it's not going to happen. This would be tremendously, wildly coincidental. But there is something else that takes place, too. I remember reading a book about a missionary in a culture that really was never reached by any Westerner or Easterner, anybody. It's this small tribe in the middle of nowhere. And this woman had to learn the language, even though there was no way to learn except sitting and living with them for years. And she learned the language. And before she knew the language very well at all, she remembers seeing somebody die. Only the fact of the matter is, she knew this person wasn't dead. But the group had decided this person is dead. They had a different measure of what was death than we do. We have a measure, if your heart stops, you're dead. So somebody might have their heart stop 12 times on the operation table. They were dead 12 times. For these reasons, I don't have enough information. I could read into it and say, well, definitely Lazarus' heart stopped, but I don't know that. Maybe they deemed him dead because they couldn't feel breath. Maybe they deemed him dead because he was turning pale. Who knows what? But there are ways that we know somebody's dead. But And back then, I don't know if that would be the definition. And if any of you know where I might find this in literature, kind of description of the ancient world and what they considered death, let me know. Then there's 7 external miracles that I will talk about. The water into wine can only be done through a miracle. There's no way at some placebo, everybody thinks that unless they're so drunk they think they think water is wine. Highly doubtful. Great catch of fish, 2 times that was brought up in Luke and in John. Both cases, not enough information. Jesus calms the storm. I put it not enough information only because it might have been coincidental. There's a lot of coincidences that go on with Jesus' ministry. Have you noticed that? But they could be coincidental from a skeptic's point of view. How about walking on water? Can't be done. Feeding 4,000? Can't be done. Feeding 5,000? Can't be done. The fig tree. In the book of Mark, it happens immediately. This is a miracle. In the book of Matthew, I need to switch those around. Switch those around. In the book of Matthew, it's a miracle because it's the same day. In the book of Mark, it's the next day. I've done a little research for this particular one recently, and I found out that there is a possibility. Now, I will once again say I don't know, but having said that, it is possible that a tree could look healthy, but because it's rotten on the inside, completely die by the next day. And if that be the case, maybe Jesus, in trying to find a fig, he saw the tree was dying. I'm stretching it. All right, but I still say, from a skeptic's point of view, the book of Mark is not enough proof, but book of Matthew is. Peter's mother-in-law. Now we're dealing with a lot of different miscellaneous. Peter's mother-in-law, nobleman's son, a woman with an issue of blood. All of those I don't have enough information about. Withered hand, absolutely 100% miracle, because this is a structural disease. And placebos cannot touch any kind of structural disease. And finally, the centurion's servant, his ear was cut off by Peter. And Jesus picked it up and put it back on in the book of Luke. This can only be done by a miracle. Now, I want to look at the groups as well. And this is a later version, and I've tweaked it so that it's geared just for the groups, because I was looking at a lot of different angles, but I just wanted to focus just on the groups here. To make a long story short, you have 13 different group miracles going on. And out of those, you have 8 times when everybody in the group was healed. This is impossible. As I said before, it's like 40 to 50% have the ability to be touched by placebos. And I do want to mention, placebos don't just hit stupid people, they hit smart people too. We don't have a real clear definition who's placebo possible and who's less possible to receiving a placebo effect. But definitely very intelligent people can be as well. So in this case, we have miracles going on. 8 out of 13 cases, or 62% of the time, everybody in the group was healed. Now that means everybody who's seeking it. I do want to mention that. There's a difference between those who want to be healed and those who didn't like Jesus. The ones who didn't like Jesus didn't have enough faith. Those who liked Jesus and wanted healing had enough faith, always. Because their faith was demonstrated in coming to Jesus and asking him. That's all the faith they ever needed. Sometimes they did some wild and crazy things to do so, but that was demonstration of their faith. So we have 62% of the times, everybody. There's 8% of the times, or one case where it just said many. And in this particular case, I was leaning towards wanting to say everybody, but because sometimes they might be summarizing it rather than saying everybody was this, oh, just a lot of people were out of this group, many in this group. But other times they tend to say, and far more often they want to say, always, everybody. Everybody who touched him, everybody who wanted, anybody who was diseased, all that kind of stuff. And we have one case where just not many. That was his hometown, and once again, people didn't like him. They were offended. Isn't this Jesus, the son of the carpenter? We know his brothers and sisters. They're offended. And one, I put a question mark. Three. For three, I put a question mark. And I'll leave it at that. So let's break everything down. For individuals, 7 out of 37 miracles, 7 of them are completely miraculous, cannot be explained any other way. That's 19% of his miracles. 81%, or a 30 of his miracles, I don't have enough information, whether in the Gospels or because I just don't know. So most of the times it's just the Gospel did not clarify enough for a modern reader to understand the full extent of the particular miracle. Were they 100% blind, or were they just 50% or 80% blind? We don't know these things. And we don't know so much of the backgrounds of people being possessed and all this kind of stuff. And because of this, I have to conclude that 81% of the people, I just don't have enough information. Having said all that, I do want to emphasize one last thing. If we see 62% of everybody in a group being healed, by the way, that's going to include functional and structural diseases. If we see close to 20% of the people getting miracles that can't be repeated by a placebo when individuals came to Jesus, I have one conclusion. From just reading the scriptures or from what the scriptures tell us, these passed the test. These were miraculous, and they didn't follow the pattern of the copycat, which is the placebo effect. This is Ted.